All right, looks like things switched over successfully here. Couple pieces of housekeeping stuff before we get started. First off, since I recorded the last stream, which was the gaming stream earlier in the week, it looks like the software that I use for VTuber capture got an update of sorts. And I'm not exactly sure what they changed aside from the fact that it seems to affect the camera. If you notice just by me sort of moving around slightly and turning my head towards things in normal range of motion, it's causing my avatar to sort of float around, and it's a little bit more dynamic, so it looks like more dynamic movement, which is fine. That's not a problem, but it tends to be a little bit erratic. Like if I just move my head around slightly, the model kind of leans and zooms in and out, even though I'm just doing slight head movement. Or if I tilt like that, or move closer or further away from my cam. And I'm not sure exactly why they did that. It may have to do with how my Live 2D model is coded and how it's reacting with the latest updates to the tracking. But it's a little distracting. So I'm going to try not to move around too spastically and have my model jumping all over the place. But when I'm doing beatboxing stuff, I tend to move around. So my apologies if it's a little bit weird for the stream today. I am currently working on getting an upgraded model. Same character model, just with some additional features and some better movement. And alongside that, I'm looking at potentially switching VTuber capture software. If so, then that may solve the problem about the weird camera tracking. But for now, it's just going to have to be something that I deal with on the streams. For the gaming stuff, it's probably not going to be as big a deal since I don't move around as much when I'm gaming. But for stuff like this and the chill streams, and I'm just talking and or making noises at the camera, it may look like my model is sort of bouncing around. So I just wanted to address that in case people wonder. Another thing just for the session today, it is ungodly hot where I live right now, and today's temperature is going to potentially break records where I live. And because when I'm streaming I can't run a cooling unit or fan since it picks up on the mic, I am currently sitting in my recording space with no fan or anything on at all, and it's really hot. So I'm going to try not to melt and die from heat while we're doing this today. But I didn't want to move the actual stream time because I like to keep my times locked in unless something really urgent or an emergency comes up. Hey, what's up, Edward? Welcome to the stream. You just heard me saying we're enduring through the fire and flames today, and I'm going to get a good sauna session in because it is friggin' hot. But hopefully all the sound from the mic is coming in clean. I haven't really had to adjust much with the sound settings for the jam streams. It's been pretty consistent. But what I can do is sort of give an intro for what I wanted to focus on for the jam session today. Like I've talked about on previous ones, I plan out my material that I want to cover in the jam streams in advance. I'll usually write down a bunch of ideas or go over some sound theory stuff from my sound list and put together a rough sort of plan of material I want to cover, so I'm not just sitting here on camera rambling at you guys. And what I want to focus on for today's session is talking about sound variations. So we're not really going to go over a ton of new beatbox sounds that I haven't covered before. I will spend some time talking about a couple, but the main focus is going to be talking about how slight variations or changes to the technique on certain sounds can turn them into a different sound altogether, and how to sort of work them through and put them together in practice for pattern construction. And so what I've started doing is actually highlighting things on my sound sheet here as they come to me throughout the week, so I know when I actually get on stream to do this what I want to cover. And so this stream is going to be sort of another informal tutorial. A lot of the variation stuff is building on the concepts we've talked about previously and explaining how to sort of tweak the technique a little bit to change them up and form new sounds. So I will be explaining how that works. I think in between we'll probably be working on some more pattern practice and more sound stuff. And then that should cover a good majority of the stuff I wanted to talk about here. So what we can go ahead and do first as part of the intro and warm-up, I'll run through some pretty basic patterns just to sort of get warmed up, get the blood flowing, and then I'm going to go straight into the discussion on sound variation. And that'll give folks time to filter into the stream if they want. So we'll go ahead and get started. Switch. Oh boy, it's already getting hot. I'm going to go through a ton of water today. I'm trying to keep an eye on my OBS here so I can see what my model's doing. It looks, just out of the corner of my eye since it's on my other screen, it looks like my model's kind of bouncing up and down and moving side to side. I don't think it's clipping into the mic unless I really lean over like that. But that's kind of funny. Not really the intention behind how I have my model rigged, but we'll deal with it for today. So I'm going to make an effort today to actually update my status thing on the jam stream. I have not been doing a good job of that. So let me do that now. Okay. So, like I mentioned towards the beginning, the main focus of what I wanted to talk about today has to do with sound variation. And sound variation is taking the idea of a sound or technique in beatboxing and applying some sort of subtle change or tweak to the technique, and it changes it into something completely different, or something that is different enough that you can consider it a different sound. And so what does that sound like? The first example I wanted to talk about is a variation on the outwards K sound. And that's a sound I use pretty frequently. It's one of my favorite snares. And the outwards K sound sounds like, it's got kind of a sharp hitting, almost like a kind of like a clap, but not quite as punchy as the BMG or the. So the outwards K, it sounds like a gun cock if you do it really quickly to do it. But the variation for this one, I don't know if it's got an official name in beatboxing, but I call it a filter variant or a filter outward K. And the way you do that is very simple. The outward K is done, to recap real quick, by putting your tongue on the roof of your mouth and creating a seal and then forcing air outwards from the sides of the tongue. So it's like you're creating a K sound, but you're getting more of a seal and you're really pushing it. So instead of just a where your tongue is down, you have your tongue up and you're creating more of a force that's being pushed outwards. And that's how you go from a to a, and you keep your tongue in place so that you can reset it and do the K without having to move your tongue all the way back up and whatnot. So it's pretty useful for doing in rapid succession if you just keep your tongue in place and you get something like a. So the filter variant is literally just closing your mouth. So you go from a to a, and it sounds kind of like an audio filter that's applied using effects or like a filter program. So if we put it into practice, what I'm going to do with all these variations is I'm going to explain where they come from, how they're done, and then what they sound like in a set pattern real quick just to illustrate. So if we have a practice beat for the regular outward K, just something like, and then we change it from an outward K to a filtered outward K, it would sound like, and you get an entirely different sounding, almost muffled sounding snare. And I found it could be useful for things like drum and bass patterns as well, if you want to go for something a little bit higher speed, because the K snare can be relatively quick. I think all of them can be relatively quick. So if you're mixing that into a more drum and bass pattern, you might get something like a, and that's going to lead in pretty well to one of the other variants that I am going to talk about later. But this whole exercise with the filtered outward K is a pretty good example of how you can just play around with things like mouth position, breath control, position of tongue, wherever, depending on the sound. And you can do a lot of things that give you flexibility to mess around with the sounds and change them up to create new ones, or combinations to create new ones. And so that's really going to be the reoccurring theme of the discussion today. It's how to take the tool set and make subtle changes to things in the tool set to give you additional tools to use when constructing patterns and routines in beatboxing. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next sound, which actually does link directly into the one I was talking about before. And this is a variation on the kick. If we're looking at the Beatbox tool set or the drum kit for the basics, you will almost always have in most beats a bass drum kick, or the, and it's the boots and cats. It's usually the first thing that everybody who takes up beatboxing learns, is how to do a basic kick. And then you move on to the more advanced things like your triple kicks, and then stuff like that. Well, the variant for this one is not necessarily done the same way, but it's the same type of sound, and that's what's called a throat kick. And I think most people probably can mechanically break down how a throat kick works, but to illustrate what it sounds like, if the regular kick is made by using pressure with your lips and your mouth to get a throat kick is made using pressure in your throat with your mouth closed for the basic version, and it sounds like. And again, I think a lot of people probably know how to do this one already, but for the sake of discussing variations and mechanics, I'll explain how it works, just in case people have never encountered that sound before in their life. So throat kick is pretty simple. It's just doing the sound an sound, a UH sound, which comes from the throat. You can feel it if you put your hand on your throat. If you go, your vocal cords around where your larynx is, it does move slightly when you get that sort of low grunt. It's basically just a grunt, and you get the sound. Well, for the throat kick, you are closing your mouth, and you're doing that, and you're trying to force it a little bit to get more of a sound push. So if you close your mouth and do the you get. And the fact that your mouth is closed is what's causing that sort of reverberation. And as you get better at controlling your throat muscles and you push it more, then you get a more forceful sound. And it's tricky to pick up on mic, especially if you're doing it live, because the sound is coming from inside your throat and it's not resonating outwards. So usually I'll see things like beatboxers will put the mic closer to their throat to get that throat kick to come up audibly. But as you practice and get better at doing it louder, it goes from a more soft to a louder. And to illustrate in a practice beat what I was talking about before with the filtered outward K, if you want to combine these two because they both are closed mouth sounds, you could do a beat that synergizes pretty well because, again, it's all closed mouth. So you could do something like a and you could do something like that utilizes the same technique for two very kind of related sounds. The tricky thing with throat kicks, and I guess this is sort of a practice thing, being able to do them rapidly in quick succession, that takes practice because your throat muscles have to get conditioned to that sort of movement, and you have to be able to do it on rhythm. And I'm not super great at it because I don't use throat kicks a ton. It's not a regular part of my sound list, but it is good to know because it gives you options when it comes to the kick, which normally there's not a whole lot of variations on the kick sound. It's usually just a. You could do things like more hollow kick with a by opening your throat, but the sound doesn't change dramatically. It sounds more or less the same. But if you mix in the throat kick with the then it gives you a bit more options. And another technique that's based on the throat kick, as far as I can tell, in my research, I couldn't find an actual beatbox term for it, but it uses the throat kick to transform it into a bass sound. So what would that sound like? If you take the but open your mouth and then uses the motion of the sound into a sustained note instead of just a quick hit, you go from a to a and that can be used like a bass. And again, I don't know what it's called. I'm going to call it like a throat kick bass until I figure out what it's actually called. So using it in practice, again, it's using the same motion as the throat kick. This one's a little bit weird to describe because it's hard to illustrate, but you're basically just taking the and you're going and sustaining the note and then kind of changing the pitch by relaxing your vocal cords, which is how you go from a to a So that one, let's see how we would use that in a practice beat. You could do something like I think the key to that one is getting a bit more impact on the, like a stronger throat kick, and then sort of pitching it downwards to get the professional beatboxer from the States named Napalm uses this particular type of sound a lot, and I'm pretty sure he's doing it the same way, and he uses it sort of to mix up his bass lines and notes. It's, again, it's got to have a name somewhere. I just couldn't figure it out when I was researching these. So that's the variation on the throat kick. The next one that I have on the list to talk about is, mechanically, from what I can figure out, a variation on tongue bass, which I believe was something we covered last jam session. I'm trying to remember. And to recap, tongue bass is created by rolling your tongue, similar to what you hear in certain languages and sounds that people make external to beatboxing. So if you're rolling your tongue, just to break it down, you get the, and that's created by forcing air over your tongue by keeping the sort of corners of your tongue tight so that the air is forced to go over your tongue, and you create that reverberation. So basic tongue bass in a beat would be something like and like we talked about before, you can vocalize tongue bass. You can hum or create a vocal note, since the actual doesn't take any vocal cords at all. It's just air in your tongue, and that's how you get the so and you can do things like, you can mess around with pitch and whatnot. It's pretty versatile, and I really need to make it a point to use tongue bass more often. So the variation that I'm going to discuss here, it looks like there's a couple different terms, but the most consistent one I saw is called the machine gun. And machine gun sounds like, and I think this is another type of sound that people may have heard or done at some point. Like maybe when you were a kid and you were pretending to have a gun and you did something like, and you made that particular sound. It's one that I already knew how to do before I actually learned what tongue bass was in beatboxing. But sort of refined and focused for beatboxing specifically, the machine gun can be used as a filler sound or a way to get a rapid rhythm of noise in between other beats in a pattern. So what would that sound like if we were doing something like maybe a trap beat, something like a and use the sort of like a filler. That's the most common way I've seen the machine gun used. And the way you do the machine gun is using the same techniques as tongue bass, but you do it with your teeth closed or your teeth clenched together. So if you close your teeth but keep your mouth open so the sound can escape, and you do the behind your teeth and force the pressure, that's how you go from like a to a. You're basically causing your tongue to rattle against the inside of your teeth when you're forcing air through, and that can't really be achieved unless your teeth are closed and it gets that small space to sort of reverberate against the teeth. So again, it's just doing something like a tongue roll or tongue bass, but behind your teeth when they're closed, all completely together. You don't have to clench really hard. Just close them so that the sound is restricted by your rows of teeth, and that's how you get the. And that one's a little bit more of a practice-based one because probably for most people, when they try and do it, because their tongue muscles aren't as used to doing that motion, it may be a little more soft. But as you sort of practice it and get better at forcing air and keeping that tongue control, it'll get louder, and you might get something like a. I got to move away from the mic for that one. And you could use it again as a filler in different beats. Okay, moving on in the discussion. We've got some inward sounds. We've got 2 inward sounds here on the list that are not technically variations. They're separate sounds. And I wanted to mix in some new sound discussion with all of the variations just to sort of switch things up as far as what I'm talking about and keep building on the ideas of introducing new sounds that we can discuss here on the jam streams. So the first one is one that I've used. I don't know if it's got an official term. Again, I try and research these things as much as I can before I start planning out what I want to discuss on these jam streams. And the sound isn't something I invented, but I've sort of adapted it into something I use. And again, I researched around and couldn't figure out an actual official name for it. So I'm going to use my term just so I can keep it straight. But if anyone who's part of the beatboxing community sees this and knows what the song sounds actually called, please let me know so I can update my list and make sure I call out or give credit to the first person who used it. But this particular sound I call the shot whistle. And the shot whistle is a little tricky, and I'm still practicing how to do it consistently, especially in a beat. I can kind of do it just from neutral, but doing it in beat, getting the mouth position is a little bit more tricky. It's what I've been practicing. But the shot whistle sounds like it's sort of an impact and then a sharp push of air followed by a whistling sound, which is how you get the. Full disclaimer, I am terrible at beatbox whistle sounds. Just normally, I can't whistle at all. I can't whistle outwardly. I've never been able to. Ever since I've had this particular body, I've been trying to learn how to whistle, but I can't. I can do sort of an inwards whistle that's connected to some beatbox techniques, but in general, I can't whistle. So any sort of whistling techniques are very difficult for me and require a lot more effort to learn. That's the only whistle I can do, and that's an inward whistle. And to break down the shot whistle sound that I'm using here, it's actually using the position for a different sound, which I'm also learning and I can't do at the moment. And that sound is called the Poh snare, P-O-H. And the Poh snare is one that's been getting more popular. And I think it came out of the Indonesian or Malaysian scene for beatboxing. I forget which beatboxer invented the Poh snare. It might have been Ego. But that one is really neat. And as soon as I learn how to do it well and consistently, I will break it down on one of these streams. But to break down the position that I'm using for that technique that applies to the shot whistle, I'm taking my tongue. Again, you can't see it, so you have to bear with my explanation here. I'm taking my tongue and bending the tip down to the front of my mouth behind my teeth towards the floor of my mouth. And I can't do it while talking, otherwise you won't be able to understand what I'm saying. But I'm basically pushing my tongue down and forward in my mouth. It's a real weird position, but it's causing my tongue to sort of create a bump that's anchored at the floor of my mouth, right in front of my bottom two front teeth. And what that's doing is creating a channel for the air. And the post-snare is done doing the same way too, but the post-snare is outwards. It's an outward breathing sound. The shot whistle that I'm doing is inwards, but it uses this tongue position. So with my tongue in that position, what I'll do is create sort of like a kissing suction, like you're going to pucker up your lips and seal, and then I'll breathe in really sharply with my tongue in that position. And that causes the air to push in and get that sort of shot sound, and then the whistle's coming from the fact that it's going up over my tongue since it's raised while it's anchored. So again, position discussion for this one is really weird. I'm sorry it's not going to be something I can illustrate here, but when you combine all those elements, create that force, and then breathe in all at once, that's how you get the and again, I'm bad at whistles, so that's why it's not consistent. But when done correctly, you get the well, I'm trying to do it without whistling, but you get that shot sound and then the whistle behind it. So that's one of my practice sounds. Again, it's not where I'd like it to be, and I'm practicing consistency. But if we were to take the shot whistle, and I'll try and do it to the best of my ability in a beat here, just to illustrate. If we do a beat and work it in, it sounds something like a the second and third ones in the pattern were a lot better than the first one. The whistle actually came through a little bit more on those last two in the pattern. So that's the shot whistle sound. Again, whistle noises in general for beatboxing are a long-term project of mine. I'm hoping to be able to get a couple more variations down at some point to work in, since I don't know a lot of melodic or melody note driven sounds. So that's going to be something that I come back to on these jam streams as I get better at them. Next up, another new sound that I think I've done on these streams as part of pattern practice, but I haven't talked about, is what's called the zipper. And the zipper is very similar to the lip roll. I almost said Rick roll there. That's not what I want to do. The lip roll, and the basic dry lip roll, which sounds like that. And the zipper's got a couple different ways people utilize it. The most common way I use it in patterns is a bit more like a filler sound. And when I do a zipper, it sounds like it's a pretty quick inward sound in the same position as the lip roll, in fact, but it's meant to be kind of like a zipping noise. And using that particular version of the zipper in a beat would be real simple. You do something like you get something like that. Well, the more quote-unquote traditional version of the zipper that I want to talk about is more of a sustained sound instead of just a real quick filler sound. And to illustrate what that sounds like in comparison, it would be something like and I'm changing my lip tension to change the pitch, but that sort of high-pitched sustained sound is usually the way people normally use the zipper. And the way you do that is by picking a side of your mouth. I think you can do it in the center, but I've never seen it. But similar to the lip roll, you pick a side of your mouth and you're creating a very tiny gap at the very corner of your mouth. And then you're breathing in and you're forcing everything through that tiny opening. And that's how you're getting that high-pitched buzzing sound. And the position for it's a little bit tricky. You aren't rolling your lips over your teeth so much. You're keeping them loose enough that the position doesn't sort of suck in, but you keep it tight. And that's sort of the main difference between that sound and the way the lip roll works. So by keeping it tight and forcing air through that tiny gap, that's how you get the... So if we were to contrast the use of the zipper in a pattern, we could do something like... And once you get the mechanics of doing the zipper down and you're comfortable getting just the sound to come out, you can use your tongue to change the rhythm or break up the actual sound however you want, which is how I was doing the... That's just using my tongue to cut the air off and creating the stick. And you're getting that broken up version of the zipper. And it changes the sound that way. So depending on where someone starts in beatboxing, where they choose to sort of start their focus in learning sounds, I feel like if you learned the zipper first and you're able to get the... You could probably more easily pick up the lip roll because, again, it's the same position. You're just using mouth pressure and you're dragging air and creating sort of a reverberation with your lips. So instead of that high, tight, buzzing sound, you would go from that to the more synthy, bassy, regular or dry lip roll, which goes like... And if I knew that, I probably would have made more of an effort to learn the zipper and develop it on the front end. Because like I mentioned in previous streams, the basic lip roll and the inwards lip roll are two of the most popular sounds in beatboxing right now. And it took me forever. It took me almost a year of messing around with techniques and talking to people and reading tutorials before I was able to get the inwards lip roll, which sounds like... Or the dry lip roll, which sounds like... And had I have known that it was connected to the zipper technique and worked on that first when I was just learning, I probably would have been able to get the lip rolls and their variations a lot faster. So that's kind of a tip for anyone who's trying to find a place to start when it comes to beatboxing. Some of the sounds are connected mechanically, and if you learn one technique or you learn the mechanics of one, it makes learning the others much, much easier. And for zippers specifically, I feel like I need to call out one dude from the beatboxing community, a professional beatboxer from India named D-Lip. He is insane with his zipper control, and he's done variations on that particular sound that I didn't even know were possible. I'm definitely going to make sure and include some of his clips or his battle stuff in the media share when we eventually do one, because that guy's bananas. He's not the first person to really make a lot of crazy sounds with a zipper, but he's definitely one of the most unique. And he shocked a lot of people, I think, when he started popping up in events and whatnot. All right. Moving on, let's jump back into another variation explanation here. It's actually good that we're segueing into lip rolls because this next one is, in my opinion, a variation or variant technique for the inwards lip roll. Again, to separate the terminology, the regular or dry lip roll is the, and I do have a variation I'm going to discuss with that one in a sec. But for the inwards lip roll, or the, that's a bit more high than most people do, since I tend to default to the siren version. Let's see, if we were to drop it down a little bit and go, inwards lip roll, the variation I want to talk about here is what's called a teeth roll. And I don't know who invented the teeth rolls, but the person I've seen talk about it a lot who might have invented it could be Mr. Wobbles. I need to go back and research that a little more. But I know he's talked about the technique and I've seen him do it a lot. So it could be his. If so, then credit to Mr. Wobbles, who's a big cornerstone of the beatbox community in general. If you've never seen Wobbles, you should check him out. The guy's pretty talented. But teeth rolls take the same idea of an inward lip roll, where you are taking the lip roll position, and I'll break down the mechanics for the inwards one since we didn't talk about it. The inwards lip roll takes the standard dry lip roll position for the, and instead of using mouth pressure to get that sound, you breathe in and keep your lips in the same position. That's how you get that punch. And by doing an inwards kick at the beginning is how you get it to punch, and then you go into the actual reverberation. So by breathing in while doing the lip roll, you get the, and then with the inwards kick on the front end, that's how you get the. Well, the teeth roll is exactly kind of what it sounds like, and you're putting your teeth over your bottom lip and then pulling air in like you would for an inward lip roll between your teeth and your bottom lip. So what does that sound like? I'm not too great at teeth rolls. I've been practicing them, trying to get better and better at using them in a pattern. But teeth roll sounds like, it's definitely a lot more tight and almost buzzing sounding, but it's still an inwards lip roll. It's just with your teeth. And so again, you go from a to a. And the best way I can sort of describe it is putting your front teeth on the top row of your mouth over the lower corner where you normally do your lip roll. For me, it's on the left. And you're putting your teeth over that, and then you're pulling air in between them under your teeth over your bottom lip. Again, it's very difficult to describe mouth position without seeing a human face. But the sound it makes is different, and it doubles as a way to get additional air when you're putting together a pattern, which is what is useful about all the inward sounds. So if we were to take the teeth roll sound in practice and put it into a beat, you might get something like a dubstep beat where you've got like a And just like you would use a dry lip roll or an inwards one, the teeth one slots into that particular type of sound function pretty well. It's just useful for switching up your sound variation and getting something different in a spot where you'd normally be using one of your other sounds in the toolkit. That one I've considered an in-progress sound as well. I think there's a lot of potential for the teeth rolls. By switching up position or tightness of the lips, I think you could mess around with the sound that comes out a lot. So as I figure that out and come up with different ways to use it, I'll mention them here on the jam streams, because I think it's kind of an unusual but versatile sound. All right, before we move on from lip rolls, I did want to talk about a variation or pattern application for the regular or dry lip roll. Again, that's the, And I don't know what this is considered because it uses a combination of inwards and outwards pressure. I don't know if you can lump it under the drag category, but the sound itself, I don't have a name for it because the thought occurred to me as we were talking about lip rolls. But it's basically a rapid lip roll that's created by forcing air out and then pulling the air back in rapid succession to get the lip roll in between the outward sound. So let me demonstrate that because it's hard to describe. This particular pattern sounds like you've got a outwards and then the inwards, and you're just going in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out over and over and over again. And again, I don't know what this is called. I think it's probably just like a lip roll outwards drag, inwards, outwards drag. I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that. But the useful thing about the pattern one, it's really good practice for building up lip strength when you're just learning the lip roll. Because when you first start out, this is something I mentioned before, but when you first start out learning the lip roll, it's difficult to get clean and loud. So when you're learning it's not loud and audible, and it's definitely not consistent and clean when you're first learning it because your lips on the side of your face are not used to pulling in air, and you have to build up muscle strength. That was the one thing that no one really told me when I was trying to learn that sound, is that it's mechanically got a couple components, but until you have the lip strength, your ability to make the sound clean and on demand and consistent is primarily driven by lip strength and muscle memory. So for this other one, if you're practicing just drills, and I don't think I've done this on drills here, but maybe I should for practice. If you want to build up lip strength using lip roll position, you can mix up that outwards inwards pattern pretty easily, and then just do that for 30 seconds straight, and you'll feel it immediately in your face. Your face will be sore because your lip muscles are getting an actual workout. So how do you do it? If you assume the regular position for the lip roll and force the air in to get the outwards one is just pushing air out through that same position without moving your mouth. So instead of you get a, and you could do this just by closing off one side of your mouth and leaving a little gap in the corner where the lip roll occurs and forcing air out of just that space. That's how you get the, and you can close your lips a little to get more of a reverberating buzz instead of just a, you can close a little bit to get a, and it's real simple sound in practice, but when paired with the lip roll back to back, that's how you get the, and you use your mouth pressure to create that outward sound and you pull it back in rapid succession. And so the drill or the sound itself, again, sounds like, and how would you use that in a beat? You might do something kind of like a dubstep breakdown too, where you might go, and you might utilize the sound that way. The other neat thing from a practice and muscle memory perspective that I found is as you get that control, and this is what, like eighth notes? Is it triplets? I'm bad with actual music notation. But if you take the, and you get comfortable with that, you start speeding it up. And here's the variation part that I wanted to talk about here. And again, I don't think I've done this on any pattern so far. If you take the inwards outwards sound and speed it up and push it, you go from to a, and I guarantee you, if you do that and you practice it for 20 or 30 seconds and do it straight, it'll make your face hurt. But it will help build lip strength and muscle memory for doing that basic position for lip roll, inwards lip roll, all that. And it works really well. And if you want to push it even further, you can tighten your lips a little bit, not so much that the sound won't come out, but you clamp down a little bit, so instead of a sustained longer reverberation, it's cut down a little bit. You go from it becomes a what is that, 16th note triplets? It's very fast, whatever it is, and it almost sounds like a completely different noise. And this is one I'm trying to work into patterns now, but it's kind of difficult to set up and keep the position for, but I'm going to try it here just for the sake of the discussion. So if we take our dubstep-ish beat from before and we go I think it's got a lot of potential because, again, it's still a lip roll. It's just a very fast, very tight, high speed, inwards, outwards sound in rapid succession, back to back to back to back to back. So, again, I don't know what it's called, if it's got an official name. I think it's just a probably high speed lip roll, inwards, outwards. But even doing that, practicing the really high speed version, if you're sitting there practicing lip roll motions and you're just going and you're doing that over and over again, you will build lip strength probably relatively quickly if you get used to doing that for an extended amount of time, because it takes a lot of muscle control to do that. So if nothing else, I recommend the inwards outwards lip roll drags for drilling purposes. Think the slower one, I think that one's got a lot of potential to be used in sounds. The faster one possibly too, but again, if nothing else, you do that maybe 10 minutes a day, you'll get a lot more lip control for that particular sound. All right. Moving right along in the discussion of sound variations. Let's move on to basses. I probably should have moved this to the front end of the discussion in the jam stream today, because I've been talking for a bit and it's going to wear my voice out, but I think we'll be all right. The first variation on basses, on ones we've covered before, is a variation on lip oscillations. And to recap what that sounds like, I've broken down the mechanics a couple different times, so I'll refer back to the previous jam streams if you want to hear my discussion on how to do the sound. But lip oscillation sounds like it's part of our warm-up that I did at the beginning, but like we did in simple patterns, you can use it in place of other basses. Lip oscillations would be real simple application, like pretty simple sound, one of the first basses I ever learned. But the variation, there's two I want to talk about here. The first one is a lowered pitch or hollow-ish lip oscillation, and that sounds like if you compare that to the regular one, you can tell it pitches lower and it has more of a echoey sound, and that's done by opening the throat and opening your mouth while maintaining the same lip position. It's how you go from a to that kind of oi sound. That is the beginning of the hollowed part of the noise. And that particular hollowing technique can apply to a whole bunch of other sounds as well. I'm just not as good at using it for things like hollow lip rolls. As soon as I get that one down, that's going to be a focus on one of these jam streams because it's a really cool variation on the lip roll. But for lip oscillations, If we're taking the regular one, and then dropping the pitch to get the, it's pretty useful for switching up the overall pitch in beat. We put it into practice. We could do something like, and then you have more options to subtly, and it's not super drastic, but you have the way to subtly change the pitch of your lip oscillations from standard one to this lower pitched hollow one. Another variation, and one I think I've done a couple times but I've never talked about it, is another variation on lip oscillations. Again, it's just the sound, but it's using TKs with your mouth closed. And so a TK is a hat sound, a t, 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 and a K sound without the force of an outwards or inwards K. It's just a k, 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 t, 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 t. And TKs are actually integral to technicality patterns, which didn't really have on the list to focus on a ton today. But if you are practicing TKs, they're very useful in a lot of speed patterns. So even if you're just doing a and you practice it over time, it gets a lot faster and you can use it in place of a lot of filler sounds for technicality. So let's see, the fastest I can do TKs would be, mine aren't super fast because I don't use that sound a ton, but the more you practice it, the better the speed gets and the better the consistency gets. But applying that sound to lip oscillations, if we take our lip oscillation sound and we do the TKs while we're doing that lip oscillation sound, that's how you go from to a. It's basically a way to break up the overall sustained note and make it more of a rhythm-based bass, if that makes sense. So that's how I ended up going from a to the that last one was the lower pitched semi-hollow lip oscillation with the TKs behind it. It's a little bit tricky to get your tongue position to be able to do the TKs with your mouth closed, but if you learn to do that and learn how to combine that with other sounds, it gives a lot of options for breaking up more sustained ones and adding rhythm. So I did want to talk about that briefly. Next up, let's talk about actual throat-based bass sounds and variations. And this is one that I've done a few times as part of patterns. I didn't really discuss it, and it hadn't crossed my mind until I sat in on Prince Lemon's Beatbox stream that he did recently. I don't think he'll ever see this, but if so, shout out to Prince Lemon Virtual. He's another VTuber that's also a beatboxer as well. And he did a bass overview stream last week, I think it was, or the week before, where he talked about bass technique and he introed a bunch of different basses. And it was a really good discussion. Again, I would recommend checking that out if you're looking for more of a tutorial focus. But he talked about vibration bass. And vibration bass is what I consider a cousin or slight variation on throat bass. And for the sake of discussion, we're talking about variations and sound technique today. I wanted to go over vibration bass since it's one of my main ones I use. And so if we back up a little bit to the discussion about throat bass technique, what's throat bass? Okay, it's a technique where you force air through your vocal cords and keep them tight. And the sound, to recap what we've talked about in previous jam streams, for throat bass, it sounds like and you can change up the sound for throat bass by opening, closing your lips, creating filters or distortions on them. One of my favorites is the barely open lip filter, and it goes from a wah 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 to a and throat bass is very versatile because it can be manipulated with distortion. You can change notes, you can change rhythms. One of my favorite things to do with it is make it a bit more rapid in changing notes. So instead of a, you might get a, and play around with it that way. Well, vibration bass takes that concept of getting that resonation with your vocal cords, and it's dropping it lower and loosening the area of your throat where you're doing the sound to get an overtone. So if we think about it like moving the position of your throat, or the part of your throat where you're focusing the sound in a throat bass downwards, like you're dropping your pitch, I feel like most people are going to fall into vibration bass automatically. But what that sounds like is, if I go from high to low, I'll tell you where the sound comes in. So regular throat bass, and then we're going to drop lower into the vibration bass range, and the sound's going to change slightly. It's going to go from to, and the big difference in vibration bass is you're getting that kind of rattly resonation overtone. And that's achieved by relaxing your vocal cords and pushing the sound downwards. And it's a little bit weird to describe, but once you've learned throat bass and you get really good at the way I learned vibration bass was by trying to push my throat bass range into lower octaves and lower sound territory. And then by relaxing my throat and my vocal cords, it started to get that resonation overtone automatically. And then it's had to focus in on that and practice keeping it in that range. So again, if we start high and then we push lower, and then as we go lower, we relax our vocal cords but still keep the sound out and push. That's how you go from the to the, and it's very close to the range where you get vocalized chest bass, which is the but the difference between that and vocalized chest bass is vocalized chest bass isn't using your vocal cords. It's using the rumble from your chest or the sound paired with a humming note to go from to whoa, 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 whoa. And so they sound similar. I've seen people in comments talk about going from vibration bass to vocalized chest and kind of getting stuck in between. But I feel like if you focus it from the aspect of coming from the throat bass position and then try not to keep your air from flowing outwards from a lower part like your chest, then you'll kind of stay in the territory of vibration bass and keep it there. So maybe what I can do for a practice beat here is use both throat bass and vibration bass at the same time and switch between the two and sort of illustrate how you can sort of hold the position and get that other bass to come out, because vibration bass is going to hit harder because it has that overtone and that more of a resonation sound to it. It's on mic with a good sound system and good mixing. It's going to hit harder, and it's going to focus more like a drop type bass than throat bass, which is a bit more of a melodic type bass in my opinion. So let's do some practicing. I may have to go get some honey in a little bit. My throat gets tired, but we'll see. We'll start with throat bass, and I'm going to try and transition between throat and vibration to sort of illustrate the difference, and I'm going to try not to do vocalized chest by accident. So let's see. We've got Again, it's a little bit tricky to maintain, but as you get better in holding the vibration bass position and getting comfortable with pushing the air outwards, that's how you're going to get a lot more of a developed sound. And again, I need to work on my vibration bass just like all the other ones, but it's probably my go-to for low drop type sounds. But I consider it a cousin to throat bass. So if you want to learn vibration, I say start with throat bass, get real comfortable with it, master the position of forcing air outwards and get that control in your throat. And then once you're really good at the then focus on dropping it lower and relaxing your throat and going down from a to but like all of the other developing bass sounds, vibration bass is tricky and requires practice, but it's a real fun one to use. Just be careful with your throat. It will wear your throat out if you're not careful. Okay. Moving on to another variation I had on the list here. This next one actually is going to go back to lip oscillations. I should probably move it up and group it in that category. But it combines two sounds that we already know, two basic sounds, and then it creates something a little bit different. So this one I'm calling the kick sub. That's just my term for it. Again, I don't know if this combination of sounds has an official name in beatbox notation. But the kick sub combines a kick, and lip oscillation or to create one sound together, but the main twist is that the lip oscillation is a bit tighter and starts higher and drops in pitch. So what does a kick sub sound like? In practice, it would sound like it's an initial punch and it's a reverberating bass sound that drops slightly in pitch. So to demonstrate in beat, again, I've used it more for dubstep type stuff since it seems to fit the style of the song best. But if we were to do a basic beat and work it in, we might get something like So what I'm doing there is combining the kick with a real tight lip oscillation. It's not as flappy as the, it's more of a, getting close to lip bass in that sort of real tight buzzing sound. But then as soon as the kick and bass goes off for maybe a note, then I loosen it up and drop the pitch a little bit, which is how you're going from to. And so the whole thing is, in totality, sounds like. And what you can even do is drop further, open up your throat, and drop your jaw more to go into the lower lip oscillation / hollow sounding area, which would sound like. If you want to draw it out that far in a drop. But the kick sub, I think, has the potential to hit bass-wise pretty hard on a mic. I haven't tested it with a good sound system, but because it has that initial punch and then a bass line that reverberates and oscillates really well and then kind of drops in pitch, I think if you were to use it on mic and hit it real hard, it would give a pretty low and full sound. So again, that's one that I use, and I've just called it the kick sub. It's just a kick plus a tight lip oscillation. I will continue to put out there that if anybody has knowledge of official terms for some of these sound combinations that I use, please let me know. Again, I'm not the authority. I'm just a guy experimenting around with beatbox stuff. But the kick sub's fun. It takes a little bit of control to get that tight lip oscillation and be able to play with the pitch. But once you get the whole mechanics down and you can consistently get the it's a pretty fun one to work into patterns. Okay. I think the last new sound I wanted to talk about for the discussion today when it comes to breaking down sound mechanics and techniques is another bass type sound I'm not super great at. I don't practice it a lot because I don't use it in most of my patterns. But this one is called the OD bass. And I believe OD bass was invented by Amit from the Beatbox House. I see a lot of people crediting him with popularizing the sound, and I'm pretty sure he created it. But the OD bass sounds like mine's not very loud because I'm not that great at doing it. But this one actually uses techniques from two different types of sounds we've seen so far. But as far as I know, it's not considered a variation. It's considered its own bass. And the way you do OD bass is you take tongue bass position, and instead of breathing out, which is how you get the sound, you use mouth pressure to force air out over your tongue and get it to flap, but then you hollow your throat at the same time. So instead of just getting a, which is what you'd get normally, you're getting that lower reverberating sound, almost not like an echo, but it's a lower dropped sound. And that's how you get the Again, I'm not great at OD bass. I need to practice it more. But when done correctly, it is actually noticeably loud as the sound develops. Some folks that I've seen use it pretty well, in addition to Amit, would be the Japanese beatboxer and looper Soso. Soso's got a pretty loud and pronounced OD bass. I've heard him use it on a couple of his patterns in battles. But if you get the mechanics for tongue bass and you learn how to hollow out your throat using things like the hollow clop or then you can combine those two techniques and work on OD bass. And one thing that I've been trying to work on that's very difficult, probably just the way my throat muscles work, is an actual sustained OD bass where you're doing kind of like a tongue bass outwards while breathing. So like a, but keeping that hollow position so you're getting the sustained version of the OD bass that's lower. I can't do it. It's been something that I've struggled with just mechanically, but I know you can do it because I've heard other people work that particular combination of sounds into their arsenal. So that'll be something that's considered a long-term working goal for OD bass. But it is a neat sound, and it's pretty useful because it doesn't, the basic OD bass doesn't utilize any lungs. So I think you could do a lot of things like potentially vocalizing with it. You can use it relatively quickly because you don't have to breathe while doing it. But as far as a sound I consider myself proficient at this point, not yet. It's still a developing sound for me. It's like a lot of these. All right. Before we move into the next section of the jam stream, which I thought about what I wanted to do in addition to covering variation technique and how to break down some of these variations. I thought about what I wanted to do for the latter part of the stream, and rather than work in something structured or something like our BGM discussion, which I think next jam stream I want to devote some time to coming up with some ideas for a new BGM track. At some point, either later today or tomorrow, I'm going to be setting up my recording gear, and I want to get all of the stuff recorded for the last BGM track that we came up with on stream here. I don't know if Edward is still hanging out on stream, but he was the primary person that we collaborated with to come up with the ideas for the Super Bossa Nova track. And my plan is to get that recorded and mixed together and edited to the point where I can use it on the next chill stream. And I haven't quite decided when that's going to be. My stream schedule for next week is going to probably be switched around a little bit. We're here on a Sunday. Originally, I was going to stream on Monday, but apparently it's going to be even hotter tomorrow. And I'm already dying right now, sweating my rear off here, and it's going to be worse tomorrow. So I think I may move streams to later in the week. I might do something like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I will have to figure that out and see. But there will be a chill stream mixed up somewhere in the content next week, and hopefully by then I'll have the new background music track done, and we could sort of debut it on that chill stream. But real quick, before we move on, for the last chunk of the stream, I think I'm going to work on just freestyling and some pattern construction ideas. I haven't had a chance to really just do that and throw ideas at the wall. I've been spending a lot of time talking about analysis and technique, and I would like to spend some time just messing around and kind of experimenting with ideas and patterns. So I think that's what I'm going to probably do for the last part of the stream for a while. But before I do that, I'm going to go refill my water bottle. So I will be back in one moment. We'll go to the loading screen here. All right, so what I'm going to do now is just spend some time freestyling and thinking about some pattern ideas and some things I want to put together. And if I come up with any things I want to stop and discuss from a sound technique or analysis perspective, then I will do that. But for now, I'm just going to do some freestyling and think of some ideas. I should probably be keeping an eye on what my model is doing too. If nothing else, then it's going to be jumping all over the place like it has been for the stream so far. One thing I tend to do when I'm thinking about stuff and beatboxing, it's probably shown up on my model as I've been doing stuff, is I close my eyes when I'm thinking. So it's probably sometimes you might see me doing this or jumping around while my model is doing whatever it's doing. And that's primarily because I'm closing my eyes and not paying attention to what my model's doing on the other screen. In fact, to keep that to a minimum, I'm going to put my capture window on my main monitor now that I don't need my sound list anymore. All right, I think that should be good. Maybe I can tilt it down a little. All right, let's do some freestyling, some brainstorming. With the lip roll. Drop. Water break. All right. Looks like my throat is still a little bit tired. I did grab some honey, which is making it easier to talk, but it seems like my ability to do my throat-based basses is suffering slightly. I was trying to get the vibration basses to come out, but it's a little bit of a struggle, I think, just because I've been talking for almost 2 hours. But another thing that I need to practice, and for the freestyle part of the jam stream today, I should probably work it in, is cough snares. And I meant to talk to Prince Lemon about this. I'll have to mention it in his next stream. I wanted to pick his brain on whether or not he thinks that cough snares are a real common one to use. And real quick, before I go back into the freestyle stuff, I'm going to change my working title here. We're now freestyling, and it is reflected on the jam stream status there. But talking about cough snares, again, it's not one I typically go to for pattern construction and routine stuff. My most common snare that I use is probably the PF, the second most common one is probably the K's, the outwards K snare, and then or the inwards K snare, and then probably somewhere up there too is the BMG or spit snare. And then depending on my mood or how I want to actually put stuff together pattern wise, I'll usually alternate between those. But the cough snare is one I need to practice more, for one, and two, get better at, so that it's as readily usable in the arsenal of sounds as the other snares that I focus on. So if we remember back to a couple of streams ago when I mentioned it, the cough snare sounds like and it's created by getting that cough noise and then breathing out with like a at the end, sort of back to back. So instead of just a again, I gotta get away from the mic, not cough directly into it. You're getting that push, kind of like the throat kick, where you're getting like a just with no vocalization, and then you're cutting the sound off and then breathing outwards with like a and then cutting that off. So you go from like a or a to a and the better you get at cough snares, the more that sort of resonant sound you get with it, and it sounds more like an actual instrumental filter. So I'm gonna mix up a couple beats and practice my cough snares, because again, I gotta get better at them. So let's see. Usually mid-tempo stuff works best for cough snares. So maybe we can do something like going back to our dubstep type beats. And do something like again, not one of my most commonly used sounds, so I'm not terribly great at putting in patterns, but I need to practice more. I'm going to make it a point on these jam sessions, especially when you get to freestyle stuff, to not neglect my cough snares. and to include them amongst all the other stuff we practice. But we can go ahead and move on with the freestyle stuff here. I shouldn't close my sound list. I'm going to think about some things to work in, but I'm mostly going to see what ideas pop into my head and then kind of put them together. And just like we did on the last sort of string, I'm going to see how long I can go before I got to take a break and kind of work on endurance. Another important thing when it comes to practice and long-term development for beatboxing is endurance. Being able to sit there and come up with patterns and freestyle or what have you for extended amounts of time and sort of pushing yourself so that you gain endurance from your voice, your face muscles, everything. And that's an important part of maintaining practice, just like any other hobby or sport. All right, so let's see. Go back to freestyle and come up with some ideas. I haven't done drum and bass routine in a while, or pattern. Maybe we could do that since it's good practice for both technicality and speed consistency. So let's see. How do I want to start off for drum and bass? Started running out of air towards the end of that. Occasionally, while I'm doing all this stuff, I'm looking down at the VTuber software capture here and watching what my model's doing. And just by nature of me moving my head and my shoulders a bit when I'm beatboxing, I can notice that my model looks like he's jumping up and down. And like, just this is just basic head movement and body movement. Like, I'm moving maybe an inch up or down, and the model's jerking all over the place. So this is gonna kind of look really funny when I'm editing this later, but that's okay. Like I said, when I experiment around, I think I'm gonna switch capture softwares once I get my upgraded model completely finished. But it is kind of funny to see the characters just vibing. We're on the jam streams. It's important to keep vibing. All right, I think what I'll do is I will do a little more freestyling, and then we will wrap up for the day today on the stream. It is still incredibly warm, and I am standing in a puddle of sweat. But let's see. Oh, I know one thing I wanted to talk about from a sound breakdown perspective, and it's actually probably good that we're talking about this on the jam stream where we mentioned variations. I don't think I've covered this one, and if I have, my apologies. But this is one that I don't use a ton, that I need to remember to use more, and it's a throat bass variation. So I want to talk about that a little bit here, just so it's captured. The variation is pretty simple. So again, our basic throat bass would be something like, and the variation sounds like, and what I've called it on my sound list is basically a filter variation on throat bass. And the way you do this one is relatively simple. If you think about the mouth position for regular throat bass, which is just pushing the air out and your mouth is more or less open depending on what kind of distortion you want to put on it. If you just let the sound out completely, then throat bass again sounds like, wow, 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 wow. But if you take your tongue and you put it on the roof of your mouth and you use it to block the air when you're creating the bass sound, and then create sort of a wow motion with your mouth as the sound's coming out, that distortion is how you go from a wow, 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 wow to a wow, 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 wow. And you don't have to create a seal, just put the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth and keep it there while doing the outward sound for the throat bass, and then with the wow motion of your mouth and your lips, that's how you get that sort of weird distortion filter. So I don't know what it's really called other than just like a filter throat bass. But if you're using it in a beat, you might do something like I pretty much did a remixed version of my current background music using that distorted bass. All right. I think I'm going to do one last string of freestyle patterns before we wrap up for today. So let's see. Let me think. I'm going to start off somewhere and we'll sort of see where it goes. All right. Let's see how we are doing so far. I'm going to take one more look at my sound list and make sure there's nothing else I really wanted to talk about. Another, I don't think I talked about this one. I should have done it when we were discussing lip oscillation variations. But I can mention it here, and hopefully I'm not repeating myself. It's been almost 2 hours. For lip oscillations, again, we talked about the lower pitched / semi-hollow version. It sounds like... And we talked about the regular vocalized version, which sounds like... And we talked about the kick sub variation, which sounds like... The other one, which I keep forgetting I know how to do, because it just doesn't pop into my mind readily when I'm freestyling, is a combination of throat bass and lip oscillations. Again, I don't know if it's got an official term, but that one sounds like... It's a bit more dirty, and I think the big key there is learning how to harmonize the... It's a really low, almost at the bottom of my throat range register, with the... And you're getting... I think it works better pitched up a little, but you can use that in place of just the regular... Or the... To switch up the layering and distortion and kind of harmonics that are on your lip oscillations. So in practice, it would be similar to what we were doing just in that last freestyle beat, where you might have something like... And I was mixing in some of the TK patterns, internal TK patterns with the lip oscillation there too. But it seems like an interesting pair, just difficult to get to fit into beats proper. So I'm going to have to do more research on the throat bass plus lip oscillation. But it seems like it's be something that has potential to be used as a supplement when it comes to bass type sounds. But I think that being said, I think that will do it for today's jam stream. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the main thing I wanted to talk about for today is the idea of sound variation and how to make subtle changes to beatbox technique to mix up sounds and combine things to create new ones. I will give some thought into how I want to structure the session for the next time we get together for Jam Stream. Ideally, I'd like to do one of these a week, but the last couple stream schedules have sort of been alternating, one every other week or so. So I'll do some thinking about what I want to focus on, and then I'll plan accordingly. In between, we'll be continuing with the gaming and drawing streams. I think we're due for another chill one, like I mentioned. I want to do that once I get the new background track recorded. So we'll see how the timing works out. As soon as we get off the stream today, I'm going to go look at the stream schedule and figure out what days I'm streaming next week. And then just like all the other ones, that will be posted on Twitter. And it'll be up there for the next week. So, that being said, once again, I'd like to thank everybody who stopped by and hung out on the stream today. Hopefully the stuff I covered is interesting and will serve as a foundation for things we cover in the future. But until the next time, once again, thanks again for hanging out. I will see you guys later and have a good evening.